We all stand at that precipice, don't we? That familiar, daunting edge where our aspirations collide with our daily realities. We dream of monumental achievements, of lives sculpted with purpose and precision, yet so often find ourselves adrift in a sea of distractions, deferrals, and fragmented efforts. It's a struggle as old as ambition itself. This elusive quest for consistency, for the steadfast resolve to pursue what we know is good for us, even when the siren song of comfort or immediate gratification calls out with intoxicating allure. Why is it that some individuals seem to effortlessly navigate this terrain, building empires of discipline in their personal and professional lives, while the rest of us perpetually feel like Sisyphus, pushing our boulders of intention uphill only to watch them roll back down with disheartening regularity? This isn't merely a matter of willpower, a commodity that, for most, feels as fleeting as a whisper in the wind. No, the problem runs deeper, touching upon our very understanding of human nature, our relationship with pain and pleasure, and the insidious whispers of our subconscious that often dictate our choices before our conscious mind even has a say. We ask ourselves almost daily, why can't I just stick to it? Why do I start with such fervor only to falter? This profound, universal question became the obsessive pursuit of Sheldon Howell, not as a casual intellectual exercise, but as a visceral, life-altering quest. He wasn't just looking for tips or tricks. He was driven to unearth the foundational architecture of unwavering discipline, to dissect the very mechanisms that allow some to become truly unstoppable. Today, we embark on a journey through his extraordinary discoveries, a journey that promises to fundamentally reshape how we perceive, cultivate, and ultimately embody discipline in our own lives. Before he became the architect of unstoppable habits, Sheldon Howell found himself mired in the very same quicksand of inconsistency that plagued so many. His early life was a tapestry woven with threads of grand ambition, brilliant ideas, and almost paralyzing inability to translate them into sustained action. He was a thinker, a dreamer, a voracious consumer of self-help literature, yet his reality remained frustratingly out of sync with his aspirations. Picture a young man, brimming with intellectual curiosity, meticulously planning out his days, weeks, and even years, only to find himself time and again derailed by the smallest internal resistance. He'd meticulously craft a workout regimen, visualize a sculpted physique, and then succumb to gravitational pull of a warm bed or the distracting glow of a screen. He'd commit to writing a certain number of words each morning, fueled by the dream of authorial success, only find his fingers hovering over the keyboard, paralyzed by an invisible force, eventually retreating to less demanding tasks. His desk, a battlefield of abandoned projects and half-finished notebooks, serve as a daily monument to his lack of follow-through. It wasn't a lack of desire, nor was it an absence of understanding about what he needed to do. The knowledge was there. The intention was pure, but the bridge between knowing and doing seemed to collapse under the slightest pressure. This cycle of enthusiastic starts and disheartening stops wasn't just frustrating. It was eroding his self-worth, planting seeds of doubt that whispered he simply wasn't built for consistent effort, that he lacked some fundamental inner grit that others possessed. His moment of crisis wasn't a singular dramatic event, but rather a slow, suffocating realization that if he didn't fundamentally alter his approach, his life would remain a perpetual rehearsal, never reaching opening night. He recognized that if he couldn't conquer this internal struggle, all his intelligence, all his creativity, all his potential would remain locked away, never fully actualized. This profound dissatisfaction, this yearning for an internal operating system that wouldn't betray his deepest desires, propelled him down a path of relentless experimentation and deep psychological inquiry, a quest not just for personal transformation, but for a universal framework that could liberate anyone from the shackles of inconsistency. Howell's first major breakthrough emerged not from a grand theoretical revelation, but from a meticulous observation of human behavior, both his own and those who seemed to excel. He began to notice a peculiar pattern. Individuals who were consistently disciplined didn't necessarily possess more willpower. They simply experienced less internal friction when it came to initiating desired actions. This led him to the radical realization that discipline isn't primarily about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do, but rather about skillfully reducing the resistance to starting. He called this the principle of minimum viable effort initiation. Imagine, for a moment, the monumental task of writing a novel. For many, the sheer scale of the undertaking is enough to trigger overwhelming resistance, leading to procrastination. Howell's insight was to break this down to its absolute simplest, most non-threatening starting point. He observed that if you tell yourself you must write 2,000 words today, the brain often recoils. But what if the commitment was to simply open the document, or to write just one sentence, or to spend 5 minutes thinking about the story? He recounts the story of a client, a budding entrepreneur who constantly struggled to start her daily sales calls. The thought of making 50 calls felt like an insurmountable mountain. Howell encouraged her to simply commit to dialing the first number, without any expectation of a successful conversation or even a full pitch. The goal wasn't to sell, it was to initiate. What she found was that once the first number was dialed, the subsequent calls became significantly less intimidating. The psychological barrier to entry had been lowered to such an extent that the actual task, while still demanding, no longer triggered the same preemptive paralysis. Another compelling example came from his own struggle with exercise. Instead of setting a goal to complete a grueling 60-minute workout, he would simply commit to putting on his gym clothes. Often, once dressed, the inertia was broken, and the thought of completing a full workout became far more palatable. The key, he discovered, was to identify the absolute smallest, most trivial step that could be taken, a step so insignificant that the brain couldn't reasonably object to it. This wasn't about lowering standards for the entire task. It was about strategically lowering the activation energy required to begin the task. He realized that the human mind is exquisitely sensitive to perceived effort. If the effort to start feels overwhelming, the mind will naturally seek alternative, less demanding activities. By deliberately making the initiation effortless, you bypass this natural resistance, creating a small win that often snowballs into sustained action. This principle redefined discipline for him, shifting it from a brute force battle of wills to a strategic game of psychological leverage, making the act of starting an almost automatic response rather than a draining decision. However, Howell quickly realized that merely initiating an action wasn't enough to guarantee sustained discipline. Many individuals, himself included, could successfully start tasks only to find themselves losing momentum after a brief burst of effort. This led him to a deeper, more intricate challenge. How do you maintain consistency beyond the initial spark? His observations revealed that simply reducing the activation energy for starting didn't address the underlying issue of how our environment and our internal reward systems shape our behavior over time. The first principle helped you get to the gym, but it didn't guarantee you'd finish your workout, let alone return the next day. This complication propelled him into a more profound exploration of behavioral psychology, leading to his second pivotal discovery, the principle of environmental scaffolding and feedback loops. He understood that our willpower is a finite resource, easily depleted. Relying solely on it for sustained discipline was a recipe for burnout. Instead, he argued, we needed to design our environments to make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors harder, creating a supportive scaffolding that virtually eliminates the need for constant conscious decision-making. He recounts the transformative story of a marketing team struggling with daily content creation. They understood the importance of publishing consistent material, but found themselves constantly behind schedule. Howell worked with them not on their individual motivation, but on their collective environment. They established a physical content creation zone in the office, a quiet room with no distractions, pre-stocked with all necessary tools, and designated for content work for the first 2 hours of each day. More importantly, they implemented a visible feedback loop, a large whiteboard tracking daily progress for each team member, celebrating completed tasks with a simple checkmark and a small, immediate reward like a shared coffee break. This created a powerful social accountability mechanism and immediate positive reinforcement. The environment itself began to pull them towards a desired behavior, and the visible progress created a positive feedback loop that fueled continued effort. Another insightful example involved a student struggling with late-night social media use. Instead of relying on willpower to resist the phone, Howell advised a simple yet radical environmental shift: charging the phone in a different room overnight. This subtle change dramatically increased the friction of accessing the phone, effectively breaking the automatic habit loop. The key wasn't to fight the urge, but to make the urge harder to act upon. Howell emphasized that our surroundings are not neutral. They are constantly influencing our choices. By strategically optimizing our physical and digital spaces, and by integrating clear, immediate feedback into our routines, we can create a system where discipline becomes less about strenuous effort and more about a well-oiled machine, continually guiding us towards our goals. This second principle profoundly shifted the focus from individual willpower to systemic design, acknowledging that our behavior is often a product of our environment as much as our inner resolve. The journey through Howell's observations, experiment, and insights ultimately converge into a profound, unifying aha moment, a grand synthesis that reframed the entire concept of discipline. He realized that the two principles, minimum viable effort initiation and environmental scaffolding with feedback loops, were not disparate concepts but two sides of the same coin, elegantly interlocking to form a singular, potent truth. Discipline is not an inherent trait you are born with, but a meticulously engineered system designed to minimize resistance and maximize reinforcement. It's about consciously constructing a bridge between your aspirations and your actions, one where the path of least resistance is the path of your desired behavior. The aha was the understanding that most people approach discipline backward. They try to apply willpower to overcome friction, leading to exhaustion and eventual failure. Howell's revelation was that true discipline is about eliminating the need for constant willpower by skillfully engineering your internal and external worlds. It's about making a desired action almost inevitable by stripping away the obstacles to starting, and then creating a robust, self-sustaining system of support and reward that propels you forward. Think of it not as building a taller wall of willpower, but as leveling the ground so you don't need a wall at all. The genius lies in the realization that discipline is a design problem, not a character flaw. When you combine the power of making the very first step absurdly easy with an environment that nudges you towards consistency and celebrates your progress, you create an almost unbreakable cycle. The initial easy win from the first principle feeds into the positive feedback of the second, which in turn reinforces a likelihood of easy initiation for the next iteration. This cyclical reinforcement mechanism means that discipline doesn't just happen. It's meticulously built, piece by deliberate piece, into a robust and resilient structure that can withstand the inevitable ebb and flow of motivation. It's a profound shift from a battle against oneself to a collaboration with one's own behavioral patterns, leveraging the inherent tendencies of the human mind to work for your goals, rather than constantly struggling against them. So, where does this leave us, the aspiring architects of our own unstoppable habits? Sheldon Howell's journey from personal frustration to profound insight offers us more than just a theory. It presents a clear, actionable blueprint for transforming our lives. His work unequivocally demonstrates that the path to unwavering discipline isn't paved with endless willpower, but with strategic design. It's about recognizing that you don't need to fundamentally change who you are, but rather how you interact with your environment and how you structure your daily commitments. The grand synthesis is that discipline isn't about grinding through discomfort, but about intelligently designing a system where consistency becomes a default, not the exception. It invites us to pause and consider, what is the absolute smallest step you can take today to initiate a desired habit? And how can you engineer your environment to make that habit easier to sustain, building in those crucial feedback loops that reinforce your progress? This understanding is the first step, a powerful illumination of the true mechanics of discipline. But understanding alone, as Howell himself learned, is merely potential. True transformation emerges from action, from the courageous decision to apply these principles, to experiment, to build, and to iterate. This isn't just a philosophy. It's a call to arms, an invitation to reclaim agency over your intentions and to meticulously craft a life where your actions consistently align with your highest aspirations. Don't let your ambitions remain trapped in the realm of dreams. Take the principles you've learned today, apply them with intention, and begin the exhilarating process of becoming truly unstoppable. Join a community of individuals committed to growth, to building lives of purpose and relentless forward momentum. Subscribe now and commit not just to this channel, but to yourself an extraordinary future you are capable of creating, one meticulously disciplined step at a time.